Good morning. Welcome back to the Marketing Thread. I am your host, Todd Schnick, joined by my friend and colleague, Carol Morgan. Good morning, Carol. How are you?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, this is a great idea on something to talk about. I'm looking forward to diving in because I haven't always thought that through very well on my end. So looking forward to seeing what you have to say there. Before we begin, though, remind the audience what the Marketing Thread's all about.
Well, the Marketing Thread is a video series featuring marketing tips and marketing trends. Our goal with this series is to make short, snackable videos that we release monthly that discuss current marketing trends or ongoing marketing trends. So it's a collection of videos that address things like social media best practices, generation-based marketing, media relations, blogging. We have a new one that just came out last month on media relations. So there's lots of fun, different marketing strategies you can dive into.
Great stuff. I'm having a ball with this series. Having fun being a part of it, but also learning an awful lot. So kudos to you and your team for what's been a really, really great series. So what are we diving into today?
Well, today we are talking about what goes where when it relates to content and PR, blogging, and social media content specifically. We might dive into a couple of other areas as well as a little bonus for our loyal watchers and listeners. But, the real reason for this is just, all the confusion around this subject. I cannot tell you how many times we get an email saying, "Oh, we have one home left in blah, blah, blah community. Will you write a news release?" So we'll talk about that more. But that's the reason for this is, where does that content go? What makes good content? How do you identify where it goes and what its highest and best use is? We all know there's a lot of noise out there and lots of people vying for attention. So you've got to have the best strategy possible to break through that clutter.
I think this begins to answer, or not answer is not the right word, but begin to solve the problem of, we always complain about there's just so much content out there. And part of the problem is that people are doing what I always do, is that I create this piece of content, which I'm proud of. And so I say, I'm going to blast it. I'm going to put it everywhere. And it doesn't necessarily need to go everywhere. Thus, that's why there's so much content out there, because people are just blasting this stuff where it probably doesn't necessarily need to be. So this is going to be a great thought exercise too on what to do with the content strategically once you create it.
Yeah. And we're talking about some content can go everywhere. I have some examples I've blended in of, some content that really works really well in all different, tactics, but not all content does. So, and that's where the struggle bus, I think, starts is, what do you do with that? So, what's news? What makes a news story? And I know, Todd, you've been in the political arena, and that's even, very different than what we do. Talk a little bit about how it relates to, politics and reporters in the media.
Oh, well, no surprise to anyone listening to this that what a journalist is looking for covering the political arena is different than what's happening, say, in your specialty in terms of, builders selling homes and communities and marketing new communities and all that. We've all heard, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's a pretty common strategy for political journalists. As we record this, there's a certain governor who's in trouble with some ladies. And so that's all anyone can talk about, and it's different than I have one last home to sell in the community, but even in the political arena, there are different focuses on these journalists. They're looking for different kinds of things. There are people that do care about actual policy and legislation, and so there are those looking for stories about, new legislation, and so there are those that are looking for that cutthroat. I want to bring down a politician kind of angle on a story. There's a lot of politics, obviously, is a lot of us versus them, right?
Right.
There's a lot of discussion of conservative versus liberal, Democrat versus Republican, how's that competition going between, are we going to kill that person's legislation? So it's a very different, very cutthroat kind of journalism. But it's important to know that there's just different kinds of journalists looking to cover different kinds of things, which then speaks to this topic of I got to get the right content where it needs to go.
Yeah. And, is it hard news? Is it soft news? Is it a business news story, human interest, or features? A lot of what we write for home builders and pitch in the new home industry or pitch related to, technology and services for the new home industry is more of, kind of features fluff, more of that, services, product, benefits. Doesn't mean you can't score placements for it. It just means you have to find the right reporter who covers that type of news. Is the last new home in a community news? Typically not. But today, with so little inventory, maybe it could be if it's in a really, really desired community.
Well, it also depends on what the goal is on pushing that story.
Yeah.
Story isn't one house left. One is, well, I want to sell that last house. So what's the best approach to get that last home sold? Or is the focus, I want the community to know that we're rocking it and
so successful.
This neighborhood sold out, and so I'm patting myself on the back to say, hey, look at us. I mean, we did it. So there's a different approach to that. I mean, I think the point here is you got to be strategic and think about what story am I really trying to tell you?
So the story of, 99 homes sold in 60 days or whatever it is a much different story than that 100th home is the last one that's left, right? So absolutely. And I have a kind of a fun story that we just placed. I thought this would be, topical to talk about. Everybody loves these stories and this coverage works everywhere. So this is a new development in the Stonecrest Mall area here in Atlanta, and the site plan was approved, and it has been in Builder Magazine, which you see here, or Builder Online. Today it ran in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This morning in the DeKalb specific area. Again, know the reporter. The reporter that was interested in this covers DeKalb County. So it's also supposed to run in the Business Chronicle, and that would be with their real estate reporter. So this is an example of a story that has lots of different audiences, because obviously Builder Magazine is the in the know in the industry. And then you have, DeKalb County, people who live there who want to know. Then you have real estate news, which is a little bit of industry as well as consumer, people who want to know what's going on where. So several different beats and types of reporters and several different pitches that went out to score this news in multiple areas. So kind of a cool example. And you'll see this one again, because this story is something that is news and topical and applicable for other sites as well. So let's dive into blogs. And blogs are interesting and a little different than news, because what goes here could be news, right? Or it also could be more evergreen content. So when I think about blogs, I think about content that you want Google to index, that's really deep, really thoughtful content that is good for the search engines, i.e. Google, but then you also want it to address what your website visitors are looking for, what they need and want to see. So there's a little bit of it depends on whether, it's good content for your blog or not, depending on what your goal of your blog is. So, if Parkland Communities had a news site or news blog on their site, then their news of a new development would be perfect for their site, because they want to get, developments and different areas of town indexed so that they're seen as the authority on developments in that area, and people contact them with land for sale or to buy the home sites from them. So that would be very applicable for them.
Just last month, Mandy and I were talking about blogs in our discussion around media relations. And we were talking, I still think a lot of companies look at a blog from the perspective of customer acquisition, right? Does that maybe make sense to some companies that I got to use I'm on a blog to sell and get customers?
Right.
We could argue that you can. But in the context of this discussion, in our discussion last month with Mandy, was a blog is a great way to establish expertise with the journalists that you're trying to get coverage from, and so even if you don't use your blog for customer acquisition or to sell more homes or widgets, whatever the case may be, it is a great vehicle with which to establish that expertise
and credibility
with
Yeah.
media, with journalists,
Yeah.
so it's got that going for it as well. It's a great tool for that.
Well, the blog is also a great place to answer those frequently asked questions that you get asked all the time. And having a question as the title to your blog post is a great way to get indexed by Google. Because we all know people use Google and the search engines to go out and to ask questions. So if you get the same question over and over and over again, it might be a great thing to answer on your blog so that you are addressing what your visitors want to know, your potential buyers want to know when they come to your site, but you're also addressing something that people are potentially, Googling to get an answer for. And that content's a little bit more evergreen than, announcing a new development or announcing we have one home left. Thinking about your blog content as content that's very thorough, very deep, kind of the be all end all on that subject matter. You could write about a community when you launch that community. And if you pick your title tag carefully, then you can continue to just update that blog and republish it with a new date as things happen. And this is a really, really good search engine optimization tactic that most people don't use because they aren't thinking that far ahead. They're not thinking about the life cycle of that community and the fact that if you have one really well-written blog post, you can use it over and over and over again, potentially for 2 years as you build out more and more and more content on it and become more and more the authority on that specific community.
That's an approach that I, for most of my blogging career, did not employ. And because I thought, hey, I'm writing new stuff and
Right.
yay me. But I've learned that I don't necessarily have to create new things every time. I can polish and update older material and republish it. And I have seen my Alexa rankings skyrocket.
Right.
And the only strategic tactical change I made was repurposing older material and republishing it. So I think I can echo what you just said. That really does have an impact. So that's another great way to leverage your blog.
Well, even events can be updated and be evergreen if you write them correctly. So let's think about if you're writing about a parade of homes, or you're writing about a wine and food festival. If you know that's something that's going to happen every year and you're going to write about it every year, again, when you create that title tag for that event, make sure you don't include this year's date in it. The date can be in the body copy or it can be in the headline, but you don't want it in the URL or the title, that title tag. So there's ways to write about events that happen, once a year or every other year, and then rewrite them every year. And then you're just getting all of that, SEO, search engine optimization juice. You're already the authority on it. You wrote about it last year, write about it again and give yourself more authority. Keep that fresh and keep it current. And that's something that we're doing a whole lot more of here at Denim, just because it's smart and it makes sense. And, once your community is sold out, you could still update that announcement that you did 2 years ago on your new community and make it say that it's sold out. And then at the bottom of that blog post, list 2 or 3 communities that you have coming soon in that area. So, the content's now become evergreen and it's still relevant to you and your site versus something that you're just going to have to hope gets buried or that you're going to delete. And, we don't want to delete all those posts. We'd like to keep them as relevant if they've been indexed.
Right. Absolutely.
So anyway, the whole back to the zoning of the Stonecrest property, this ran in Atlanta Real Estate Forum. Atlanta Real Estate Forum is a news site. So the site runs, breaking news, which this would have been, as well as news that's more evergreen or news that can be updated. So if you're kind of looking at for examples of different types of stories and different types of news, this is a great site to look at to help spur some creativity there. So AtlantaRealEstateForum.com, which is a site that we run at Denim. So I'm giving ourselves a little shout out and plug there.
Understood.
So let's dive into social media content, because to me, this is the place that anything goes as long as it makes sense for your goal and your followers. You want it to resonate with your audience. So the last home available for sale is perfect for social media. Come
Agreed.
now, come one, come all. Don't miss out. It's your last chance. Don't miss this fantastic community. You know, it can be news. It can be evergreen too. Social media becomes very interesting because typically you're using your blog to syndicate the content to social media if you're blogging. So whatever's on your blog is going to go on your social. So if your blog is more evergreen content, you're going to get that on your social as well as whatever that last home, left is, and the new announcements and the things that aren't really news and aren't really bloggable, but you want to share them with your audience.
Yeah, social media strikes me as if you have something urgent to get out there, or something that you have 5 days to get this process done. That's where social makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's more urgent. It's more immediate. It's it's the venue that most people check first for that breaking news. You just think about how Twitter's used today. You can find out anything quickly on Twitter that you might not even be able to find out yet from the local news.
Just think about how you would use social media. So if you're, let me just pull an example out of my fanny here. If you're sitting in line at the grocery store and you've got a couple people ahead of you, are you going to pull out your laptop from your backpack and open up and start reading newsletters from your email inbox? Probably not. You're going to scroll through Twitter.
Yeah.
You're going to scroll through Facebook. And so seeing that kind of story, so you got to almost think about, there's a lot of people, as you said at the top of the show, part of the goal of this video series is snackable stuff. So you got to think about social media sometimes as kind of
definitely
quick,
snackable. Yeah.
Quick stuff. Hey, I'm still in line at the grocery store, but there's one home in this community. I got to send myself a reminder. And when I get home, I got to talk to the missus and take action on that.
Right.
So you just got to think about real world, how people are using this content.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be reading a blog post when they're
standing in line at the grocery store, right?
Or waiting for the train, or sitting stuck in traffic. They're going to be scrolling social,
mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and with social media, we actually do have a whole marketing thread on getting people to talk back. We called it reply posts, getting people to talk back and talking about, the use of things to catch their attention. Because again, a lot of this is breaking through the clutter, photos, video, stories on people, company news, testimonials, all of that play in really well. So make sure you check out our reply post video on how to get them to talk back. But I still think
you got to be strategic on social media, because the thing that I always did that I realized was largely a lazy move on my part was I would create a piece of content. It really didn't matter what it was, whether it was a long form video or a 140 character tweet or whatever it was. But then I had this checklist in my mind, and I'd go to Facebook. I'd go to the Facebook group page. I'd go to Twitter. I'd go to LinkedIn. I'd go to Instagram. And I would just mindlessly push that thing to every social platform I was on and check off my list and say, all right, good job, good marketer.
Good job, Todd. Yeah.
Well, it's possible that piece of content was more appropriate for something like Twitter versus, say, LinkedIn. And I think you need... I think you need to be a little bit more discerning on, should this be blasted across my entire archive of social media platforms? It probably deserves a little more thought than that.
Well, that's interesting and brings us to my next example, which again, we're going back to that Stonecrest piece. So in the case of Parkland Communities, they only use LinkedIn because they're really marketing B2B. They're marketing lots to home builders. They want the consumers to know they're out there in case the consumers have a piece of land that they would like to sell, but they're really marketing, lots to builders. So they used LinkedIn, and Parkland Communities first posted this on LinkedIn, but where they get their lift and where they get their really biggest reach is when Jim Jacoby himself shares the news from Parkland to his personal page, because he has way more followers and they're interested in what Jim is doing more so than what Jim's company is doing, even though they're interested in the company. And if that, hopefully that makes sense. But on LinkedIn, what we have found is you really get the lift, share it first to the corporate page, and then have the high profile individuals who work for that corporation share it to their personal page. And you can see here, looking over my screen over here, because that's where this is, they have 54 likes on this and 6 comments, and it just posted 4 days ago. So, what you guys don't know is 4 days ago was Friday and today is Monday. So over the weekend, it got that much lift. And that's just a tactic that we've been using, trying to make this, more relevant. How do you reach the right people?
I don't give a hoot and heck what Tesla Motors is up to, but I sure pay attention to Elon Musk.
Yep.
So that's applicable to what you were just talking about.
Perfect case in point, Todd.
Yeah.
All right. So I promised some bonus material. We've kind of covered, my thought process behind what goes where and why. So let's talk a little bit about email marketing, because again, we get lots of questions on what makes good email marketing. And again, it depends. So there's so many different types of email that different types of content are applicable. So you have promotional emails, which would be that one home left, new community available. You've got drip campaigns, which are going to tend to be more evergreen. That's, what's going to queue up when somebody contacts you on your website. They're going to continue to get an email every week or every 2 weeks or whatever you set up as that schedule. So those would be more on, our company philosophy, how our team works, how we build a home, our green practices, those types of things that aren't going to change so much from year to year. And then newsletters. Again, the key word in that is news. So your newsletter should have news in it. And a lot of us put those together by pulling from our blog. So again, that speaks to what would work well in your blog, but it can be a mix of news and, those kinds of announcements. Maybe you're speaking somewhere. And it can be a little bit of evergreen content as well. Maybe it's a how to do something. In our case, we try to put a lot of news on the Denim blog that's really more tips and tricks. How do you, max out your Facebook ads? How do you get the most bang for your buck from a different trick, tactic, or tool? So you can do that with your email marketing too. And again, another nice place that you can use a wide mix of content and make it work.
No doubt. And there's probably some value to thinking through. Most email service providers, like for example, MailChimp,
right,
have the wonderful ability to do these segments of your list. You may have this one massive email list, but you have the ability to categorize people into different subgroups or whatever the verbiage is, and how
I think even in MailChimp, I think you can tag them and you can subdivide by tags as well.
Right,
so that's nice.
So what I'm trying to get at, though, is that there are probably some people on that list that will want to know about a community that has one home left versus others that would want a more less frequent digest of everything cool going on with the organization, and so probably some value in putting a little more deeper thought into, is there power in segmenting this list in some way, shape, or form? Because there are people who maybe they don't need to know about one home left.
Right.
So do I need to clutter their inbox with stuff that they don't realize about? And then that just kind of tags me as a pain in the butt email sender. And so they don't pay attention to when I do put out something that they would care about.
Exactly. Yeah. And here is going back to our Atlanta Real Estate Forum example. We do plaster the world, I think 5 times a week with news. So, and the news is everything from new hires, again, the Parkland communities, 388 lots approved, new people actually there's 2 new hires in this one. And then, our Atlanta Real Estate Forum radio also goes in this. So again, a really nice mix of things that are more evergreen as well as things that are more news related. Huge fan of MailChimp and Constant Contact. And then there's so many great CRM systems in our industry. So
no, I mean, the Atlanta Real Estate Forum to me is the way I look at it is, every morning I get this digest and it kind of gives me a quick overview of everything happening in the industry in Metro Atlanta.
Right.
And I don't necessarily see it as a place to get urgent news. You're not going to send
but you should.
I'm just saying, I'm not expecting an email at 4 p.m.
right.
saying, hey, one home left in this community. I mean,
Correct.
so you also, the audience kind of over time develops an understanding of what they can expect
Right.
from a newsletter that they subscribe to, and so you kind of begin to also understand what to expect, which is good. I mean, you hear people say there's value with newsletter strategy to have distributed on the same day at a regular time, so people kind of come to expect.
They know when to expect it. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Then, our last kind of tip and trick is advertising. This is another great place for promotional content. And, advertising is interesting. We see both branding and advertising. And the branding is kind of more evergreen, if you want to look at it that way. It's not topical. It's not news. It's branding. It's promoting, what you do and who you are, not necessarily what you have available for sale today. And then, you've got all of that, what is available today that you can also do in advertising. So this is again one of those anything goes here. Whatever it is that you think is relevant that you need to get out there, advertising is a fantastic way to do it, because you're not going to, offend a reporter by, running an ad on One Home Left, like you might if you send them a press release saying we have one home left.
And I think it applies here too, to think about where you place your ads. An ad that you do on a banner on the Wall Street Journal may not necessarily be the same ad you would put on Facebook.
Oh, definitely. Probably would not be. Good point, Todd.
Urge you to think that through a bit before just blanketing every conceivable possible ad portal that exists with the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and that's so true. And then thinking about, just how many ads run on Facebook and Instagram, what's the highest and best use of that content? And do you really need to run an engagement ad or a sponsored post, or would you be better served by running a web click that really drives the people to your website for what you're trying to sell? So there's lots of thoughts there too.
I'm looking at the audience here. How do you interact with paid advertisements? I mean, when you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or trying to read a news site and this pop-up keeps popping up, how do you react to those kinds of things? And so
I usually close them.
Well, that's my point is don't be annoyed with everyone else's ads and then expect a massive amount of response and engagement on yours. You got to think that through.
Right.
And what do I think is going to react to get someone to react in the way I want them to, based on what you're learning from how you interact with this kind of advertisement. So
that's a great point. I mean, I find myself, if they can make it clever, something that's going to make me laugh, I'm going to be more likely to react to it and then continue to open their pop-ups in the future versus just, closing them. If they can make it, really newsy that I'm interested in, or really funny, then that's way more relevant than just, another ad. Oh my gosh, they're everywhere, right?
Right.
So, all right. So, content machine. I know a lot of you out there are just like, oh my gosh, so much content is necessary today for everything we do. Most companies don't have a content machine. If you're lucky, you do. If you're lucky, you have a marketing staff that writes all this content for you. If you don't, then Denim Marketing is happy to be your content machine. We work for home builders, developers, and lots of others in the industry. We produce a plethora of content, everything we've discussed today, as well as things like website copy, award copy, and more. If you think of it and it needs to be written, it is probably something the Denim team does. We love to write. Any of you who follow this series have probably gathered that from myself and Courtney and Mandy. We really, truly love to write and to write pieces that are effective and get return on investment. So we'd love to work with you guys. As well.
And if you need some guidance on to better understand what goes where, hire you guys.
Absolutely.
And you can also help them look at the data and say, "Oh, we can test and see what's having an impact and what's not." And if people don't realize they can. There's the ability to kind of test some of this stuff too,
and we do so much of that. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Todd. Not just throwing it out there to see what sticks, but knowing what works for each client by looking at their Google Analytics as well as the analytics on each site. So whether that's Facebook or MailChimp or, some other program they're using, but diving into that each month to see what happened and how can we make it better? Because that's really where the rubber meets the road is, every month doing something better, having learned something from what you did the month before and moving forward with a, smarter, better plan.
Yep.
So
going back to that last slide, that integrated marketing thing, to me, that's the real power of a team like yours is that there's a million organizations out there that know all the tactics.
Right.
And chase after all the shiny new bells and whistles, but nothing's coordinated, nothing's integrated. And they're throwing all these noodles against the wall, seeing what sticks. And that's where this stuff really begins. And when you have that integrated marketing, you have a better, clearer understanding of what goes where.
Absolutely.
That really helps with that process.
You're right, Todd. And it really actually simplifies the whole process. I think once clients really start to understand what we're doing and we're looking at each piece of content for its highest and best use and putting it in this whole, network and kind of that bubble is what we call it, to use that content to push out from the website to places like social, but then send the traffic back to the website. You can do that with email marketing. If your email originates on your blog, once you send that MailChimp or Constant Contact or Lasso or whatever database you use, Salesforce, you send that email out through that and they click on that, headline, it's taking them back into your website, into your blog. So creating that whole network and making it very, very, very effective. And then using content for its highest and best use, whether that's one use or 5 uses, it really helps to streamline the plan. So many times we see people creating content and using tactics and silos. I like to say silos are for cows. So cows like silos, but I don't really like them for marketing. But using that content, over and over, as long as it's applicable, is how you form that network and get that return on investment that you're looking for. And you're not just, throwing your spaghetti noodle against the wall to see if it works. You're throwing it against the wall with a strategy that is going to work, that you're going to evaluate every month. And that if it didn't work, you're going to figure out why and either make it better or you're going to cut bait and move on.
Well, I always liken it to your GPS kind of helping you get somewhere, right? It knows where you want to go.
Right.
And hopefully as a business, you know where you want to go. So when the market evolves and you have to kind of do a mid-course correction, when you have that integrated plan, much easier to make that quick evolution, to make a quick adaptable move to kind of keep on the path. If you don't have that, then you really don't know where you're going. It's much, much harder to react to market forces.
Well, that's a great one. We might need to write a whole blog post on that, Todd, because the truth is today, if you're not using your GPS, you are lost in space anyway. So even if I just drive to the grocery store, I put it in my GPS because I want to avoid wrecks. I want to avoid road work. I want to avoid, it's not that I don't know where I'm going. It's I want to get there as effectively as possible. And I think that that's exactly your point. Make all of this as effective as possible. Have a roadmap. Make sure you follow the roadmap. Make sure you check the roadmap for any, errors or occurrences, i.e. wrecks, that might happen along the way. And, today with all the technology we have, so yes, we're all doing way more than we should and moving way faster than we should, but we have more intelligence and more data behind that than ever. So it allows us to be a whole lot more effective than we've ever been.
Well, that integrated plan helps you mid-course correction when things change, surprisingly, and they will. That's the reality of business.
That's life.
Yep. Good stuff.
Very good.
All right, so this is where people can find you if they have questions, right?
Yep, pretty easy to find, those of us at Denim Marketing. So denimmarketing.com. We're at Denim Marketing on every single social site. You can find us there. You're welcome to call me in the office, 770-383-3360. I'm at extension 20. Or you can email me at carol@denimmarketing.com.
All right. Well, that great conversation, Carol. Great idea. In all the years that you and I have talked marketing, we've never really talked about this idea of what goes where. Great stuff. All right. Well, that wraps today's episode of The Marketing Thread. On behalf of my co-host, Carol Morgan, I am Todd Schnick. We'll see you next time on The Marketing Thread.